Hi, this is Steve Matley, president of Coast to Coast Equities. Coming to you again with another issue that came up. Now, I'm at stay at home again because we're under the stay at home orders, and I'm working out of my home office. And as I said before, I really like working out of my home office. I prefer it. I'm more productive, there's less interruptions for me, and I don't have to do any commuting. I don't have to drive. I can stay right here. No driving to an office, no driving to my campus where I teach also. And that's the subject of this discussion, commuting, and how this issue may change attitudes towards commuting. Now, as many of you know, I oversee undergraduate and graduate degree programs in construction management for an architecture college in San Diego. And daily, my company also works on projects dealing with land use and urban planning. And so commuting is an issue that comes up in both of that. Many projects at the school, both in the design and for the construction programs, reflect the philosophy of embracing more mass transit and really discouraging the use of private automobiles or private cars. In our green building class, or what known as sustainable building, and the design courses that are similar to that, there's an emphasis that is placed upon designing projects that will encourage and increase the use of mass transit while reducing reliance on private automobiles. In our company, because we do land acquisition entitlement process projects, we design communities, and we have to address the impact of traffic and automobile use in our reports and studies. One major concern is commuting and the use of fossil fuels that is associated with that, and the potential negative impact on air quality, noise, and increased demand for fossil fuels. So policies and recommendations that drive these design parameters based around commuting are based upon climate change projections and reducing fossil fuels because of carbon emissions. Now, as I said in the last discussion, this is not about climate change. It has nothing to do with confirming or denying theories or projections. That's not the intent of this. It's not the point. It's a different discussion you can get into. And just like when we talked about land use and urban planning policies, it's just the primary catalyst towards the trends and the push towards more mass transit and less commuting, that policy. And it's not the point of discussion whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's just to acknowledge that that's where most of the emphasis comes when it comes to policies on using mass transit. The current situation is, of course, social or physical distancing. And the hardest hit areas are the urban centers where cross-contamination is virtually inevitable because of the close proximity of humans to one another, a lot of people living in a small space. Buses and subway systems and commuter trains, it's nearly impossible to maintain a safe distance from other people. It's just not designed that way. The idea is efficiency of space, to get as many people into a small space as possible to get them moved down with the least amount of fuel expended. And we all seen photos of overcrowded subways in major cities, or perhaps you've experienced that yourself, like I have some places. Transportation choices and commuting behavior, I think, will change because of the situation we just been through, because of this pandemic. It may be difficult to get people back onto the bus, train, or subway after this experience, because people may be imagining those crowded mass transit systems in Wuhan, China, where the whole pandemic started, or thinking about the crowded New York subways where the virus hit the hardest in the United States. In California, of course, mass transit's already hard to sell. Even those whom I know who are the most ardent environmental activists tend to avoid mass transit a lot and favor their own car, even for very short commutes. And there's a lot of reasons for this. So I'm going to take a little rabbit trail tangent here. California mass transit is not like mass transit in European cities, Asian cities, or even New York City, or even the Bay Area for that matter. I'm talking Southern California mass transit. California politicians and environmental leaders wring their hands in frustration and bemoan the fact that Californians just don't want to give up their cars. Well, the truth is, there's some truth to that, but the real truth is that the reason most don't want to give their cars up is because California mass transit is overwhelmingly dysfunctional, unreliable, inconvenient, and uncomfortable. It doesn't get you where you want to go when you want to get there in any fashion whatsoever. Many is the time that I've sat in gridlock traffic on the freeway, watching right next to the freeway the train go by, going from San Diego to LA, and thinking, I wish I could take that train. How much easier that would be. but knowing that there's no way that would work. Instead, I have to fight traffic going into LA because I know there's no way that that train is going to get me there and back in a day because it's just not scheduled that way. The tracks are there, the trains are there, the personnel and engineers are there, but it's not scheduled to work for anybody. In fact, the last train leaving Los Angeles that'll get me back to San Diego where I live, I'd have to leave by 2 o'clock in the afternoon out of downtown LA. What kind of workday is that going to be? See, it just doesn't work. No commuter train schedule works to get up and back. And I don't have hours when I get there to take a bus to go where I'm going, and the light rail doesn't cover all the places. Now, LA's light rail is much better than San Diego's, but still, it doesn't get you very many places you want to go. San Diego's light rail really gets you no place you want to go, other than maybe the downtown loop, the convention center, Old Town, some malls in Mission Valley. That's about it. There's really no place else you want to go. It doesn't hit Balboa Park, Coronado, La Jolla, Ocean Beach, Pacific Beach, anywhere anybody wants to visit in San Diego. So there's no reason somebody's want to sit on a bus for an hour and a half to go where they could drive in 25 minutes. See, I think in California it's because mass transit systems are mostly run by public agencies that are staffed, that have boards that are staffed by political appointees. And the political appointees are nominated to those positions because they funded campaigns of politicians. And none of those people would ever be caught dead taking mass transit anywhere because they've never used it. They have no idea how to make it functional, and therefore it doesn't work. I actually worked on a project that was the Central Mass Transit Intermodal Facility for San Diego years ago. We built a huge garage, and what happens, most of that is parking for the people that work for the transit authority who don't take the mass transit to work. But that's my, the problem is that the political leaders who appoint these, the people that run these boards for mass transit authorities, and the vocal entertainment and tech industry, environmental activists who scream for more mass transit and support these politicians, they all have their own private limos and luxury cars, and some even have their own private jets to get them around. So let me back away from that little tangent there. That was my rabbit trail tangent on Southern California mass transit. But let's get back to the issue of how attitudes may change because of this stay-at-home order. As I said in earlier discussions, making major decisions affecting a lifestyle based upon a single issue is always very problematic. Many separated, interconnected issues affect the decisions of mass transit and commuting. A virus as contagious as COVID-19 will never be something most people are willing to gamble with on a crowded subway, train, or bus, unfortunately. And if you don't think thoughts of this pandemic are going to go through the heads of many people when they're deciding when, how, and where they're going to commute, you're seriously underestimating the level of fear and concern felt by many after this pandemic. I see a coming trend wherein many will look to avoid the close proximity forced by mass transit and return to individual private automobile transportation, which forces separation from others just by its very nature. I would also expect that this might affect carpooling decisions and the use of rideshare services to some degree, because people are going to want to stay separated, especially if another cold and flu season comes up. There's going to be another pandemic, whether it's just the plain old flu or another version of this, SARS or COVID or bird flu or whatever else comes up next. People are going to be thinking about these things, and they're not going to be stuck relying on mass transit. Just like that urban housing and land use policies we discussed before, what works to reduce carbon emissions is the opposite of what works to prevent the spread of a pandemic. Putting people together in close proximity helps to reduce carbon emissions, and it's the worst thing in the world to prevent the spread of a communicable disease, as we've seen with the hardest hit areas of Manhattan, San Francisco, Wuhan, China, northern Italy, the more populated centers. The thing is, it's much more complicated than a single issue or one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to mass transit and commuting policies. And those who may disagree with a policy are not just stupid or ignorant or uncaring. They may have considered something that you have not, perhaps something more ominous and more urgent than the issue that concerns you. So don't just dismiss people that question policies on that as if they just don't know what they're talking about or don't care. Perhaps they just care about an issue that you haven't thought about yet. We all have something to bring to the table, and it's more complicated than a single issue, as we have just seen. Of course, this is just my opinion based upon my observations, and I'm throwing this at the experience of my profession too. And we'll have to wait and watch to see how this all works out over the coming months and years. My intention here is to highlight what I think may be a coming shift in the thinking and attitudes towards mass transit, and to open the discussion and provide food for thought. Because I don't think we're going to go back to where we were before, and I think mass transit, just like the dense urban housing, may be a little bit of a casualty of this pandemic because of the fear it's left in people. Stay well and stay safe. I'm Steve Matley, president of Coast to Coast Equities. I'll talk to you next time. Stay well, stay safe.
Ah